Well, I hope that everybody is having a good 2026 thus far. I'm currently working on a couple of additional videos in the background, so I thought it'd be kind of neat to have a story video for a change. This was kind of something I mentioned that I was interested in doing previously. So I got a story here that's kind of been taking place recently and still taking place to a great effect, unfortunately. So I figured I'd tell this one while all the details were still pretty fresh. I've been interested for some time now in opening up a Roth IRA for myself. Now, if you don't know, a Roth IRA is just a really great tool for investing and having tax-free growth. It's essentially a retirement account, and all the money that you invest into it grows over the decades, and that will all be tax-free by the time that you retire and you need it. So they're really great to do for a young person to at least get started, because it's never too early to start investing or start a Roth IRA in this case. So I went around and I did some research on who I could do them with. They do require kind of a custodian to help you through the process of doing them. You can't just do it absolutely all on your own. You need a financial institution or at least a platform to work with. So last fall I reached out to a couple of places just trying to get kind of the details and how the system would work, and just had some basic interactions over the phone trying to do some research on what these different places had to offer. I reached out to a small number of different investment firms as well as a credit union, and I particularly wanted to do it with the credit union because credit unions do typically have lower fees than, say, banks and a lot of other institutions might. I also had some accounts with this credit union in particular, and a lot of family had accounts with this credit union. So I just thought it made sense to do the Roth IRA with the credit union because we were already used to dealing with them. But I just did not know what I was getting myself into. There was 1 week that I'd been in the midst of my college classes as usual, and I chose to work that Friday, but I had to rush home in order to actually ensure that I could actually arrive during their hours of operation because I did not want to go in on a Saturday. Where I'm going to college and where I'm working is quite a drive, really, from the area that I grew up in and where the credit union is that I wanted to go to was located. There were other ones closer, but I wanted to go to a specific one that I was more familiar with. So I was headed that way. I actually made sure to call them ahead of time because I wanted to ensure that somebody could be there in order to help me with setting it up. You never want to make this big plan of rushing somewhere you can't even do it once you arrive. I mean, that'd just be really frustrating. So they indicated that somebody there could help me out, which was great news. And when I arrived, I said, I'm the guy that called ahead of time, wants to set up this Roth IRA. So they passed me a form across the table to just jot in my typical information, as you do when you're opening an account with a financial institution. And I could tell from the girl that was trying to help me out that this was kind of her first time. She had to be helped through much of the process in order to make sure that she was doing everything correctly from me by one of the older employees there at the credit union. But that's okay. Everybody kind of has to start somewhere and learn. So as I'm finishing the form, I hand it back to them, and there's kind of this awkward silence at the moment because it's just this moment where I've expressed my interest in handing over this money. So I ask them, so now how do I invest the money? So the two of them just kind of throw up their hands in defeat and just say, oh, this is just way over our head. You're going to have to go get with this one guy here. Here's his contact information. You call him. You got to make an appointment, and only then can you proceed in the creation of your Roth IRA account. He'll get you sorted out. So what the situation actually turned out to be was that there was this one guy and he had an assistant where they were running like all the investments and retirement accounts across all of the credit union. And this is quite a sizable credit union. They have locations in a lot of places, honestly, all across the state. So whenever I heard that it was just one guy and his assistant, I almost felt like, this guy, he just about has the weight of the world on his shoulders. I mean, how could two people be enough to take care of all these clients, and who knows how many people have these Roth IRAs or other accounts that need to be tended to with this credit union across all these different locations. I thought this was something that really sounded like a pretty crazy story, but now based on my experience, I believe it is 100% true at this point. So I got in touch with him through Gmail, and we settled on a date and time to have our first phone call appointment. This was in probably mid-October, I'd like to say. The phone call kind of went along the lines of what you would expect in this situation. He wanted to talk about what my goals were for the account, how much I would be interested in contributing, how much risk I wanted to take on. We talked about some of the specific options that they could offer, or more specific companies that he would recommend investing in. I asked him some particular questions about kind of how I would see this on the customer end. Would I have to get with him with the deposits or the investments? How would that work? What freedoms would I have in that regard? He kind of expressed it as though it was pretty open to whatever I wanted to do, so that answer kind of sealed the deal for me and sounded good. I thought that our call went great, and by all indications he seemed like a really stand-up guy and somebody that I could get a hold of, someone I could ask questions, and this seemed like it was all going to work out and things were going to go smoothly. He immediately sent me a form that I had to sign in a couple places, which I did, and we were kind of on our way. Ultimately, though, I did need to make a second appointment with him to continue the process before it was complete. But at this point, we were kind of getting into November and December, and when you're a college student, the finals and courses can get pretty hectic with this time of the year. This is kind of the ending of the fall semester. So unfortunately, I kind of had to put creating this Roth IRA on the back burner for some time as I focused on my classes to make sure that everything went smoothly there. I didn't want to commit any unknown time to another appointment when that was a time I needed to be preparing for something that was right around the corner. So then Christmas break starts and the days kind of start trickling by and nobody's really reaching out to me. It feels like I just have to do everything here. No step is prompted towards me by any means. I had tried finally to make some phone calls towards the credit union, this guy's phone number, and their general investment phone number he had told me about, which could have possibly led me to speaking with his assistant as well. And it's actually really tough now to get anyone to answer the phone. And this is well before Christmas. It's not like everybody's off for the holidays. I'm actually making some of these phone calls while I'm at work because I'm trying to call them during working hours. And just getting them to answer the phone at this point is kind of seemingly an impossible process. So finally, on December 10th, I sent this guy an email talking about what the next steps would be of this process and asking if he could try to help point me in the right direction because I was admittedly sidetracked by my college finals and how hectic the classes had been. So now we just needed to proceed with the next steps of creating the Roth IRA. And now 2 days later, it was actually his assistant that reaches out back to me and offers that she can answer any of my questions and schedule me to meet with the number one financial guy, either in person or through a phone call. And so I was still kind of looking for what the next step was and kind of curious as to why she was reaching out to me rather than him. While he had mentioned her in our initial phone call, I was not anticipating the correspondence between her and I. She essentially explained that he had just been in all these meetings and there had even been a sickness going through the credit union. So that's why there had been a lot of people not answering the phone, herself included, just a couple days prior. So I said something along the lines of, okay, well, I'm glad that everybody is feeling better. Is there some dates or times that we could schedule this upcoming appointment in order to move forward with the process? Because I did need to have this second appointment with him to move forward. She finally listed me some dates and times that this guy who had just been in all these meetings would be able to schedule this upcoming phone call with me. I was specifically determined to go with a phone call rather than an actual face-to-face meeting for the upcoming appointment because I had a suspicion with how difficult he had now become to get a hold of. If we were to plan a physical meeting in a specific location, there would just be something wrong with, say, the vehicle that he was in. My car won't start, or there was a wreck, where we just couldn't show up to the destination and have this meeting. I was just sure that there would be some reason that this meeting could not take place if it were held face to face. So ultimately, I wanted to do a phone call to eliminate the potential problem of that occurring and just to get rid of any logistics of meeting up in one of the set branches as well. So from this chain of emails that was started by his assistant on December 12th of 2025, this is still last year, we did not have an actual confirmed appointment until December 22nd, and my appointment where it was all going to go down and this was going to be set up and good to go was not until January 7th at 1 p.m. So I started this process, think back in late September, early October, started the chain of emails on December 12th, and was not going to be able to speak to this guy again until January 7th. So we're talking about months leading into this already. So with that, I'm kind of sitting around playing out the Christmas break as usual. Christmas comes and goes, the new year starts, we're cruising into 2026, and I'm just sitting around waiting for this meeting to take place. And I was actually trying to spend some time with some family, just trying to burn up some of the last days going into this meeting, because it just felt so long just getting to January 7th. For this appointment, I wanted to be sitting in front of a nice desktop computer, because I did not know specifically the requirements of what we would be going over. I wanted to have access to a desktop as opposed to, say, a little tiny phone screen or a laptop. So as we approached 1 p.m. on that fateful January 7th day, I left spending time with my family to hurry somewhere where I would actually have access to a desktop computer. It was there where I sat there and waited for him to call me in order to fulfill our long-awaited appointment. I was kind of trying to burn some time, and by about 1:05, I just assumed, he must have been updating himself on my situation, because it had been a hot moment, of course, since October. October to January, that's a pretty good jump. So he's just trying to update himself on my situation. But as 1:10 came, I kind of started to grow a little concerned, because here was this guy that was 10 minutes late to an appointment, and there was plenty of time leading up to it. It was not as if this was some surprise on the spot appointment. By around that time, I actually decided the best course of action was to start calling him instead, because I was almost worried that this discussion was not going to happen. So I may have called him a couple times, and when I say a couple times, I might have called the guy 7 times. Every call went to voicemail. I actually called the main credit union office phone number to see if I could get anybody to answer at all. And I just sat on hold. There were multiple times that I dialed just the general credit union investment phone number, and maybe 3 tries at that phone number, all going into voicemail. I finally got a hold of his assistant on just one of the calls. And I said, hey, this guy, something's kind of odd here. This guy never called me for our 1 o'clock appointment, and it might have been 1:20, 1:25 by this point. Is there anything you can do to check on this situation for me? Yeah, I can send him a message and have him reach out to you. Okay, great, thanks. And so I give him a couple more calls, and really I've been sent to voicemail so many times, I wasn't feeling like a very valued person here. So I'm calling all these different numbers, just trying to get a hold of him or anybody, and I just don't hear anything. So I kind of just set my phone down for a moment to let it cool off, quite frankly. And I was quite frustrated that this guy could not keep an appointment after it had just been months, and I just wanted to get this thing up and not have to deal with them anymore. Then as we were approaching, say, 1:45, I actually got a call from one of the other investment firms that I had spoken to, and they wanted to talk a little bit additionally about me setting up the Roth IRA with them. So it's like, well, at least somebody would talk to me. It's not who I was initially intending, but somebody is definitely better than nobody. So this financial firm was also an investment guy with his assistant, but they definitely seemed to be a lot more responsive in the interactions that we had with one another. I asked if I was able to speak with the main investment guy there, and she asked me if I was around town to speak with him at the moment, and I said, yes, I was, but I would kind of prefer, just to save time, to do it on a phone call to prevent spending time driving, and she said that he did have an appointment at 2:30, but we could talk over the phone. So she transferred me through to him, and the conversation kind of started as the one with the credit union guy did back in October, where he wanted to talk me through the basics of the account, kind of some general guidelines he wanted to make sure that I understood before getting into it. Pretty much some of the same subjects that the last guy wanted to talk about. He wanted to ask about how much I was contributing, how long I was planning on leaving there. Because if you're putting money in an account like a Roth IRA, ideally it's not money that you need, say, next month. You still do want to have some cash on hand. And I felt that our conversation was going really well. And as we kind of progressed further into the subjects, and as this guy was further investing this spare time slot with me, the guy that was from the credit union that had missed the 1 o'clock appointment was now calling me time and time again, probably 5 times in a row, right at about the 2 o'clock mark, an hour late. And frankly, when I was on the phone with the investment firm guy, I felt that how could I hang up on him, somebody that'll talk to me, and tell him to hold on when the credit union guy could not even hold his appointment. This investment firm guy was actually answering a call and was willing to talk to me and answer all my questions, and we were having a great conversation when this other guy wouldn't even answer the phone for an hour. So I basically thought that the credit union guy, he could just sit there patiently for a little moment while I finished my discussion with the investment firm guy. And our conversation between the two of us, I felt, went really well. I actually committed to an in-person appointment the following Friday morning just because I wanted to talk more about opening the account and what some of the following steps would be. And so as 2:30 came and went, he had to get off the phone with me because he did have that appointment. But I felt that he had really committed some time and effort into having some good and open communications with me. So I wasn't just completely left out in the cold like I had been with the other guy. So now it's about 2:35, say, and I'm thinking to myself, well, I still have that appointment with that guy from the credit union. Let's see if I can get a hold of him now. Honestly, with how late he was calling, I kind of actually suspected that his assistant had mistakenly told me a 1 o'clock appointment rather than a 2 o'clock appointment, since he had been calling me about exactly an hour late. I thought she had made a mistake. So I called him a number of times in return, and this is just about 35, 40 minutes after he had called me. So we were basically playing, I guess, what you call phone tag. And rather than ringing and going to voicemail, now my phone calls would go directly to voicemail, as if they were kind of sick of getting my calls and I had just been blocked. But in many cases, I am not one to leave a voicemail, because I feel like if somebody never answers the phone, are they really going to listen to a voicemail? I felt like a voicemail could just be something else for the person to ignore. So in that case, I'm calling and they're not going to answer the call, and they're definitely not going to listen to the voicemail. I called the credit union as a whole just to be put on hold again. Nobody's answering, and it's well after lunchtime now. I then called the credit union investments line, and after even a couple attempts at that, it's like I can't get a hold of anybody. And then I do it again and again, and finally I get a hold of his assistant a second time. And I said, hey, I had a couple calls from the guy, but I had something else that I had to tend to for that time slot. But our appointment actually never occurred. Is there any way that we could still have this discussion? Because I still need to go through this appointment to get the Roth IRA set up. It's kind of the same story as it was last time. Oh, well, he said you don't answer the phone, and it's like, I don't care if I don't answer the phone. If I didn't answer the phone, I'm reaching right back out to you after less than an hour, and you can't even answer the phone. So she said, I'll send him a message to reach out to you again. And at that point, I sat the phone down again to let it cool off, and I thought, if this guy does not call me, I'm not going to reach out to him anymore. If he doesn't call me, I'm done with him. We're not even going to give them a chance, because we had this appointment set up for weeks ahead of time, and he couldn't even keep that, and he could not answer any phone calls. So after a couple moments, my phone rings, and it's finally this guy I have not spoken to since October. It's now the afternoon of January 7th, and he almost plays it off as everything's normal and nothing is the matter. And he wants to be updated on what my situation is, as he kind of completely forgot where we were since October, which I understand, but most professionals, before they are getting ready to go into an appointment or a meeting, they go through some notes and they update themselves on where this customer or where this client is at before they just kind of stumble in blind. Anyways, he stumbles in blind and he's trying to get an update from me. And I go ahead and explain, yeah, I was kind of pried away from this process due to those college finals, but I'm still interested in setting up the Roth IRA. And he acts as though he quickly catches on and then claims that the next step of our process is that he has to send me a link to go to this additional website. Now, at this point in the meeting, I kind of play it off as though our whole appointment mishap was just some big misunderstanding. I said, I apologize, guy. It was my understanding that our appointment was at 1. I guess I was mistaken. And he said, our appointment was at 1. What actually happened, and it was so crazy when he said this, because I almost predicted this. What happened was I was on lunch with a friend from the credit union, and as we were on our way back, they blew a tire out on the highway, and he did not have a spare, so we just had to sit there and wait for a tow truck to arrive. So during this whole hour time slot, while I'm sitting around waiting on this call, these guys are out on the highway somewhere waiting for a tow truck. And I thought, I basically predicted that was going to happen if we had an in-person meeting. And it's like that even happened with a phone meeting. But thankfully the guy was all right. It just would have been a little nice to kind of have a heads up and say, hey, customer, we've had an incident out on the road, everything's all right, we'll be with you shortly in about an hour or so. That's like a 3-minute phone call, but that, of course, did not happen. And so leaving me entirely in the dark, it's, well, thank you very much for your patience. Yeah, I'm real patient. So apart from the traditional credit union website, there was an additional website which the Roth IRA money would go into, and from there it would be invested. So he sends me a link to this website, and I set up my username and password. And finally, I can see the account, which is what I wanted. And at this point, I'm hoping, with as tough as this guy has been to reach, I'm hoping we can just create this account and drop him. I want to make my own contributions and make my own investments or trades or whatever without having to talk to him again. He's really just too hard to work with. And so before I want to commit this money into this account, I want to ask him a couple questions regarding how it functions. Of course, I'm completely new to the whole Roth IRA concept. I've never had one up until this point, so I don't know the interfaces or what my capabilities are as a customer. So I kind of go on to ask him, am I able to make my own contributions for this account, or do I have to communicate all that through you? And then my other question was, will I be able to make these investments and trades, or will I need you to organize all that for me? And I'm hoping that he says I can do all that stuff on my own. But after all that, he says, no, you're gonna have to communicate with us in order to do all that. That's kind of the way our system is set up, as we are your financial advisor. So if you were to do that, that would kind of cut us out of the equation. And this was really irritating for me, because in our prior phone call, he had falsely framed it in a way that made it sound like I had the freedom to do this stuff on my own. And that would be really great in this situation where somebody would never answer a phone like this guy. In a traditional case, it's really not that bad if you have to go through somebody else, as long as they can answer a phone and they can be reached. But that's not this guy. He would not answer the phone, and he was impossible to reach. And he kind of said, well, yeah, nobody's really asked us that before. He actually said that they were actually working on a system where the customer could implement their own trades, but I thought, well, if you're working on it, that probably means it'll never be done, right? So I kind of played it off as everything was all right, and I was just trying to obtain an understanding of what being the customer for the Roth IRA would look like. So after he answers my questions, and I feel like he's actually been a little dishonest towards me, he sends me through a form that requires my signature in order to send the money from the traditional credit union account over into the Roth IRA account. And this was some money that I had set aside from the form that I had filled out back in late September. But after he answered my questions, they were not answers that I liked very much. I thought to myself, I think we're gonna hold off on signing this money over. I don't want this to become any more of a mess than it already is. Nobody has any respect of appointments, or can't keep times, or doesn't answer phones. And it's like the one guy overseeing all these branch locations. I mean, who knows how many people have accounts with this credit union, and you got one guy dealing with like all the investment stuff. With how much of a pain this was, I'd be you can't give somebody thousands of dollars over the course of your life, and tens of thousands of dollars that you cannot get a hold of, that cannot be counted on, and that is like the lone support of this huge network of credit unions. I mean, what if he gets in a car wreck or gets kidnapped or goes missing tomorrow? I mean, what's going to happen to my money? It's all reliant on this one guy. The form was meant to expire in 72 hours, and I thought I was just going to let it sit there at least until I had talked to the guy at the investment firm first to see what he had to say. So I kind of played it off as if everything was all right, as I was just trying to obtain an understanding, and I was going to be on the lookout for that form. And that following Friday, I did go to that in-person appointment with the guy at the investment firm, and I thought it went really well from our conversation. I actually had confidence that the whole Roth IRA experience would be a lot smoother and it'd be a lot nicer because I was actually able to get a hold and interface with these people. It was really just a day and night difference in comparison to what it was that I was dealing with at the credit union. And this guy was super knowledgeable. He could answer any of my questions. And it was the same deal with the credit union. I had to communicate deposits and trades or specific investments with him, but the big difference was they could be reached and the guy at the credit union could not be counted on. So I got to the point where I was pretty sure that I was going to go with the investment firm guy, and so they gave me a form to fill out, and I was going through and they were trying to determine how much I was going to contribute at the start, and I was looking at my accounts, getting ready to give them those all-important banking details in order to transfer the money. And that's when I noticed, despite the fact that I had not signed those forms, the money from that one account at the credit union had vanished. I logged into the Roth IRA I had made with the credit union that I was not anticipating contributing to, and there was the money that I was going to give to the other place. So the credit union guy claimed that this form needed a signature in order to move the money over into the Roth IRA. I did not give him the signature, and he decided to do it regardless. So I was like, oh my gosh, this became even more of a mess. Actually, I had to get back with the guy at the investment firm, and I had to explain the situation to him. So basically, they need a statement on it in order to initiate a transfer, and that's kind of where the present moment is now. The credit union, they took my money and they put it into that Roth IRA kind of against my will, really. They put it in there without my signature, but I hope they're not getting too comfortable because I'm not going to be writing that money off. I'm going to be coming back for that money, and it's going to go in this other Roth IRA. So I hope they're not getting too comfortable thinking that they've got that money, because they don't. I'm coming back for it. I honestly think I might have to do like a part 2 where I re-upload this with like some additional stuff just to get the full scope of the story, because it's like setting up a Roth IRA should not be this difficult. It should not be this tough. But for some reason, with all these wacky variables, it just has been in my case. So that was my story about the credit union saga and how the Roth IRA, having one, is like the greatest achievement of mankind. It's like a greater achievement than landing a man on the moon, quite frankly. So with that, I hope you enjoyed my story. If you go out and you create a Roth IRA, hopefully it will unfold a little bit better. So with that, I hope you enjoyed, And as always, thank you for watching.